everyone. Welcome to episode 205 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
Hey, I'm James Whittingham. This week, yet another new study shows that life cycle emissions of EVs are much better than that of gas or diesel vehicles. However, the study also found that EVs can be less fun because they don't blow up when driving over a cliff in movies.
An entire shipping container of electric bikes was stolen in a brazen overnight theft. Some of the bikes were innovative prototypes, leading to the thing we really didn't want: innovation in the bike theft industry.
The U.S. Department of Energy has awarded billions to clean up manufacturing. Kraft, the makers of Kraft Dinner, Brian, will receive money to dry its macaroni noodles environmentally. I don't have a joke here. I feel like this might be a good opportunity for our audience to insert their own joke.
Well, I'm going to insert my own here because in related news, Diageo has received a $75 million grant to reduce the carbon footprint of their alcoholic beverages. That's right, whiskey and Kraft Dinner are now made with clean energy so you can have them with every meal.
And we will. All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week's show, should post offices have EV chargers? Irish schools are getting solar panels and a lot more that I don't have time to mention. But yes, lots going on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. We have a lot of television to talk about this week. So I like to watch Jeopardy! So James, are you ready to play a little Jeopardy!
All right.
Let's go.
Transportation, 600.
Rad Power and Aventon are popular brands of these.
Easy.
They are e-bikes, electric bikes.
Aha.
Yeah.
No one got it.
So that just shows you how far we really are. I mean, obviously, you and I thought, hey, that's a real easy question. Rad Power and Aventon.
These nerds don't leave their homes who go on Jeopardy. Come on.
Yeah. But anyway, it just shows you how far we still need to come. That, electric bikes, electric cars, we're still really in the early part of the revolution. But speaking about that, I want to talk more about e-bikes. There's another brand of electric bikes that I don't think we've mentioned on the show, but they're called Bike Tricks. And I've always been kind of meaning to mention them because they're from Saskatoon, which is very near.
We have mentioned them before. You mentioned them. You brought them up once before. That's how I knew about them.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't know anything about them.
I wasn't sure, but it's been a couple of years, I think, since I mentioned them. But yeah, it's really cool to have an e-bike manufacturer here in our backyard. They're called Bike Tricks. They recently released a really innovative two-chain mountain bike. This, I thought, was super cool. It's a 2,300-watt motor. This is called the Juggernaut FSXD. And
we'd like to break the neck knot, FST, because that's a lot of power for a bicycle.
Well, it's got so much power that they had to put two chains on the bicycle. So it's got a chain on each side.
Oh, my God.
And one is for the motor and one is for the crank that you pedal. So it's not a cheap bike. The list price is about $6,000 US, but there's this bit of a launch on. So I don't know if you got in and put a deposit down, it can, bring that price down. But so, yeah, I was going to talk about Bike Tricks this week just because of that. But it turns out that they got robbed. There was a huge robbery of an entire shipping container of Bike Trick bikes was stolen from a port in BC.
Hello, my name is Roshan Thomas, and I am the CEO and founder of Bike Tricks Electric Bikes. I'm here today to share some really difficult news with you. Over the years, we've grown from a passion project that started in my garage to a thriving community of over 20,000 riders across North America. But recently, we've been faced with a major setback as our warehouse in Delta, BC has been targeted by thieves. They stole an entire shipping container filled with our latest and greatest bikes, the Juggernaut FS Step Through. We've worked over 2 years on this bike and waited over 6 months to get this first production line into our possession. So this isn't just about the financial loss of over $500,000, but it's really a punch to the gut of our team and community. This is where you come in, and as a community, you can help us. You see, these bikes that are on these containers are very unique and very easy to identify from a distance. If you see one of these bikes on the street, please contact us or your local police as soon as you see them.
Wow, did they take the whole container, the whole truck?
Yeah, they drove up with a semi-truck and just took the entire container and drove it away. which seems nuts, but, apparently it happened in like 10 minutes or less. The shipping container was already on a kind of a semi-trailer rig thing with wheels on it. So yeah, they just had to hook it up to a truck and drive it away.
Oh, it's probably on a ship going overseas. I mean, we look at car thefts, that happens, and they get on into ships fairly quickly in Montreal on the East Coast.
Yeah. So anyway, quite a big deal. So that clip we played was from the Bike Tricks website. So I would urge, people listening, if you're looking for an e-bike, first of all, just go to the Bike Tricks website and kind of look at their bikes, but you'll also see the notice about these bikes that were stolen and what they look like. It's the step-through model, but there was also prototypes on there. Like they had prototypes that were not, into production yet, golden samples, they call them, that, were just coming in for further testing or something. But it's a real drag.
They vowed to continue on regardless, even though they must be a small company, relatively speaking. They probably don't have as much name recognition. But this did get a lot of actual international press, didn't it? Which is probably good for them.
Yeah. Hopefully there's a silver lining in this. And they may or may not have insurance. It sounds like it, the insurance that you buy for something like this, it kind of depends on what part of the transportation cycle that it's in. So, it's not clear if they're going to have insurance coverage for this or not. But absolutely, if anybody sees one of these bikes around, I don't know, give them a call. They are unusual. This is not a super common bike brand. Even keep an eye out for them.
When I was watching the news this morning, having my breakfast, I noticed a story came up about something that I had been following, and this is close to my heart, because this goes back to 2006 in Alberta, Canada, in a city of Okotoks, where my brother and sister-in-law lived at the time until recently. That's sort of like a bedroom community south of Calgary, one of the biggest cities in Canada now. This is before one could even dream about having solar on your roof, really, unless you were, a billionaire. It was just not something regular people did. There wasn't a program for it, for, paying for the extra electricity generator or anything like that, or a subsidy to put it on your roof. Back in 2006 was early days. They had done this district heating thing for a community of 52 homeowners, all on this sort of set of blocks. And it was really innovative because they were storing thermal solar. That is not your normal PV panels that make electricity. That is panels that produce heat. They have glycol alcohol in them. They circulate through. They get really hot. You transfer that heat to another fluid and you store it in boreholes in the ground. Deep underground, they stored this from the summer for the winter. And I mean, wow. Europe does things like this all the time, and they're successful at it. But we live, as we said so many times on the Canadian prairies, where it gets so cold. It can, they have Chinooks there, which is warm weather from the coast that can blow in the middle of winter and melt everything. And then you get like 10 feet of snow or something and it becomes cold again. So there's a fluctuation there, but they do get as cold as we do, which is very cold. So yeah, it was designed to do 90% of the heating for the home, and it did that. But this isn't your regular solar. This is something that has a lot of doohickeys and moving parts and plumbing, and apparently a lot of these little valves and things aren't available anymore because it's 20-year-old technology and they can't find the people to service this, and they can't find the parts to keep it up. So after 16 years, it's not working very well anymore, and it needs to be. They're talking about changing it to natural gas. And of course, everybody just loves it. Haha, solar doesn't work. Natural gas is the way to go, says the oil-rich province of Alberta. And my relatives always love to tell me about this stuff. But they're also not very bright. For instance, I was told that steam was used in this thing. That was to the best of their understanding, even though, it's a couple of blocks away from them. They thought for 20 years that steam was involved. There was no steam, and doors were warping because of this ancient steam technology. Well, no. It is glycol alcohol. I mean, the house I'm living in now, this is what they attempted to do in a way without the storage. They attempted to use thermal heating of glycol alcohol all winter long, where it gets down to minus 40. And this house is well insulated, but it's not that well insulated at all. It's not passive house insulated, or maybe that would have worked. The modern passive house standards were met back then.
Yeah, but 20 years ago, PV solar panels were quite expensive. So I think if you were doing something like this now, if you're going to put up a bunch of panels, you would probably make them solar PV, maybe put in some batteries, something like that.
Yeah, especially the way they designed it. You see, all these, they have detached garages for all these units. They're single-family homes, but all the detached garages are all in a row. They're all attached to each other in the lane. So there's this blocks long solar panels on these garages at the right angle. The roof is made to the appropriate angle. Well, fairly appropriate. I guess, in the winter it would have been better. But yeah, they did this. There's 52 homeowners there, and they already have natural gas installed there for the water heating because they had solar water heaters as well, which is similar in that it's thermal. These black panels heat glycol alcohol. That's transferred to a water tank, and then that water tank transfers heat to another water tank, which is heated by natural gas, but not very much because you only need half of the natural gas heating because the solar does the rest. Year-round, basically. Boreholes in the ground, storing it in the ground, tanks above ground, insulated, all this, funded by the government. It was a very exciting project for me. And I was, my partner and I were very interested, and we were asking our brother-in-law about it. They didn't know anything at the time. And, we thought we'd go visit it. It was just that exciting because nothing was going on like that. And this seemed like it's like such a great thing. And I was just, so excited about it. But because it is well insulated, I was thinking, why not put in electric heat pumps with electric backup? Because, if you have a well insulated house, it's already facing south and getting thermal gain from the sun.
Yeah.
Why not do that? It's R2000. Do you remember the R2000 standard? Mm-hmm. It's not passive house standards, but it is airtight. And it is fairly well insulated and good windows and all that.
Yeah, well, if your house is insulated well enough, you don't even necessarily need an elaborate, expensive heat pump to heat it. Just normal electric baseboard heaters could be enough. It's obviously less efficient, but if your house is really well insulated, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure heat pumps would work, though. And they would also cool it. I don't know what they have for cooling. Maybe they have air conditioners. I'm not sure. I actually don't know the answer to that. They may not. Oh, Brian, I was watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, the latest show. Do you watch that program on HBO?
I do. I haven't watched the latest season, though.
Well, I'm going to spoil it for you. The latest season is great. If you're a Curb fan, this one is one of the best, I would say.
And possibly the final season.
And possibly, as it always is, possibly the final season. You know what? I was thinking about how great it looks. It's in 4K and it just looks really good. I went back and looked at the pilot episode. It looked like a home video on like 8 Super 8 video, or not Super 8 video.
Yeah. No, the early seasons were standard def video and didn't look very good.
Oh, they were terrible. It's 22 years ago or something like that. I think 99 or something like that it started. Anyway, I've mentioned this before. Larry David's character, like the real Larry David, drives electric cars. For many seasons, he drove a BMW i3, which is kind of a funny-looking electric car. I don't know what brand he drives now. It's like an Audi, I think, or it's probably like an Audi e-tron, if I had to guess, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe our listeners know. And it's like an SUV, and it's not funny looking or anything. But in last night's episode that just came out this weekend, there's this gag in the show where he throws his keys to the valet, and the valet thinks he's cocky and doesn't like him because he was later on a mock jury member for a trial that he's involved in because he gave water to somebody who was going to vote in Alabama, and you can't do that. It's against the law.
Yeah.
A social statement on his part, but I thought, maybe the electric car part was a social statement too, because in it, he pulls up to the building where the lawyer is and asks if he can plug in his electric car. Because there's an electric charger there. And I thought that was just a throwaway to show, electric cars are a thing because they've never really mentioned it before.
So the valet is supposed to plug in the car?
No, the valet is supposed to just give the approval to plug in the car. I see. And so he does. But when he comes out of his meeting, which is a disaster, of course, the car's unplugged. It's just laying on the ground, and he needs to get somewhere to cover his ass because something's falling apart for him, and it's incredibly important that he get there, and the guy didn't plug it in, and he didn't have enough battery, so he actually ran out of battery right in front of Conan O'Brien's house. Who threw his fob at him and took out his eye. So yeah, you'll forget that by the time you watch it. But yeah. So yeah, there was some electric car stuff, and they actually had the screens of what it looked like when you ran out of battery. So that must have taken some effort, because you can't just will that to life. They must have had some help from Audi or something.
Actually ran it down, yep.
Or actually ran it down. That would have taken some works from a second crew. Oh, Hello on Twitter sent us a detailed thread about a man in Germany, because we were talking about vertical solar and fences that were solar. And he said this fella, who seems to be fairly handy, made his own solar fence. And I don't know what Germany standards are, but if you look at it, he sort of made, almost like a wire fence where there's poles going into the ground. And then he had the hardware to somehow mount these rails along it, and then the panels mount. So you have this, they're the kind of solar panels that don't have any silver in them. They're all black. They look nice on houses, but these on this fence is just basically an all black fence, which, looks pretty good for what it is, but it's facing south or almost south. And yeah, he says it works well. And he had a very detailed thread on it. He's all the expenses and all the time and all the what he did to do it. And he said it was interesting. The payback period for it was less than 3 years that it would pay off. That's really quick for a solar installation. In North America, we spend probably 10, 12, 15 years sometimes to pay them off?
Yeah, well, just even building a fence, we had to replace part of our fence a few years ago, and I was surprised how expensive it was.
It is.
So a fence is already expensive. Why not make it solar panels?
I upgrade my fence a few panels at a time every year. Lumber's so expensive now. And paint's so expensive now. Actually, I've been getting good deals on mist-tinted paint.
Oh, yeah.
I told you that story before I went in, and the mist tint was the same as the paint I was buying. It's the same as the tint that he was tinting at the time. And I said, I'll just take this. Anyway, yeah, it looks good. And he said it pays for itself faster than the carbon offset of, the manufacturing of everything. He figured that out too. And it took longer to pay off the carbon than it took to pay off the cash that he spent on it. So, Europe's a different situation than where we are in North America, but, electricity is probably more expensive, so the payback is faster, and there's probably more incentives and different situation there. But I thought that was interesting. So thanks to Hello for mentioning that to us.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to clean whiskey. So we talked before about thermal storage batteries. So a way to store excess clean green energy is thermally. You can use solar to heat up basically large bricks and whatnot. So this is a company, Diageo, that's going to replace their natural gas-fired heat with this company, Rondo. They've got heat energy batteries. So this is in Kentucky. And Diageo makes alcoholic beverages. This is a multinational corporation. So they've gotten up to $75 million from the Biden bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And this is going to allow them to get rid of the natural gas and replace it with solar and these heat storage batteries. So, if you take a bunch of bricks, basically, and heat them up, you can save that heat for a long time. So the idea being that you typically charge up the bricks, you heat them when you have lots of excess solar power, and this heat lasts for a long time. So this is hoped to be a bit of a blueprint for other industries to kind of do this thing. In order to keep these bricks hot, the input power is as low as 15%. So basically you run the heaters for around 4 hours a day, but then you can keep the entire system hot all day long just with 4 hours of heat.
That's amazing.
So I think this is a thing we're going to be seeing a lot more of as we move forward with decarbonizing many different industries. Thermal heat storage is going to turn out to be a big thing. And yeah, you get clean green whiskey out of this at the end, which is nice.
And assuming money savings, too, for the company so they can thrive and maybe discount their booze and make more alcoholics.
You stop paying for natural gas if you do this. So one would think that zero fuel costs would be make everything cheaper.
2024 seems to be the year of the brick.
Yeah.
The year of thermal storage in rocks and bricks. And it's hard to say how much this will take off. But the argument is that it's not new technology, because I worry when people talk about new technology, like even geothermal isn't ramping up very quickly. They say that there's new technology for geothermal that helps, more opportunities for having it almost anywhere. Yeah, and you know what? We're making a new aquatic center in our city. We live in a small city on the Canadian prairies, and they're making a new aquatic center after, I guess the last one was when I was about 10 years old for sort of the Canada Summer Games. And they're using geothermal. Did you hear that?
Yeah, that's really great. There was a lot of research done in the 70s here about using geothermal, which we did talk about a couple of years ago on the show.
Right.
The university where I used to work at, they did all kinds of research on this. So I believe they pulled from that research from the 70s in order to make the plans for this new, swimming pool that'll be heated with geothermal. Now, at the time in the 70s, like a lot of things, like the price of natural gas just sort of came back down again after the 70s energy crisis, and they didn't end up doing it because it would have cost more than the natural gas. But this is where we're at. And a few years ago, I almost bought a barbecue that had bricks in it. Like, I forget the brand. Maybe it was a Cuisinart barbecue. It was still a gas barbecue, but it had bricks in the bottom of it. And the idea was that the gas heats up the bricks, and you end up cooking your food with the heated bricks rather than so much the natural gas.
Well, Mike, back to the point of the geothermal for the aquatic center for swimming and recreation. What they did here in the city is they had a controversial stadium built. We had a football stadium for the Canadian Professional Football League, which was popular here. It still is popular here, I guess. It's not quite as popular as it was at its peak, but I mean, everybody is a fan of the team, it seems. Even gravestones have flags of the team over them, which I can't understand. I mean, is that your highlight of your life? Okay. I mean, it's good to have a hobby, but come on. The stadium was in a poor part of town, the old part of town, and they were going to rejuvenate this, revitalize it, right? They made this huge promise that we're going to tear down the stadium, build it over, half a kilometer away or whatever, and brand new stadium is going to cost a lot of money. We're going to raise your taxes for 30 years to pay for it, and it's already needed upgrades, and it's already, been extended because of the pandemic, because we weren't paying, gobs of money per ticket then. And so this empty space is vacant. And I remember the mayor, our current mayor, said recently, I never knew that we were supposed to put in low-cost housing or anything like we promised. Nobody, I don't remember that. And for some reason, I can't find the news stories, but everyone knew about it. It was the promise. It was the linchpin that made the deal go ahead, that made people stop complaining as much. And then they actually finalized it. Well, they're not doing that. But my thought to you, Brian, is since they're building it in that area and using geothermal, why not build subsidized housing with geothermal district heating in it as at the very least a backup, or because I think this is such a great idea for people who need low-cost housing to have low energy bills, to build them efficiently, facing south, well insulated, have some PV on the roof for the offset their electricity use, and heat it with geothermal. If you're going to do the geothermal for this, why not, fulfill your promise?
Yeah, and there could be enough room. I'm not sure how big the site is, but yeah, there could be enough room to do the swimming pool and do what they promised a long time ago, which was, low-cost housing.
Well, a new study on the life cycle of emissions of EVs viz. Gas or diesel by friend of the show, Corey Cantor at Bloomberg New Energy Finance. We interviewed him on the show. He did a new study. So many people have done these studies. Universities have done these studies. All kinds of academics have done studies. There's study after study. And some of them show different results. And this one is maybe even more stark on the favor of EVs, because everyone's passing around stuff that EVs aren't environmental. And, we had a person write in last week about a Facebook post that he saw. Well, they've done the study. They've done yet another study that comes to the conclusion that virtually all other independent studies have also concluded, and that is EVs have a lower life cycle emissions than their internal combustion counterparts, up to 70% lower. And they base this on 250,000 kilometers of the life cycle of the vehicle. So if you owned it for 250, or someone did, before pass it along to other people perhaps after it gets old, if you're lucky enough to do that. And based on 2023 data. So even in places like China, where coal still plays a large role in power generation, EVs have lower emissions overall. The reduction is about 27% there compared to 71% lower in a market like the United Kingdom, where coal has mostly been pushed out. And as we always say, you buy an electric car, it gets greener every day because your grid gets cleaner every day, even here in our place. So in a market like the U.S., an EV becomes a cleaner option after about 25,000 miles of driving, which is about 2.2 years for the average U.S. vehicle. And like I said, we always talk about this, it gets better. But he found that by 2030, the break-even point will have even moved up significantly in all regions. For example, an EV there in the United States in 2030 will be lower emitting after 1 year of driving. So the hell with them. I don't know. How do you express this to people? You have to argue with them. You have to bring a binder full of facts. It's exhausting. But
yeah, well, I guess there are some people who would argue like we should walk, we should ride public transportation, we should ride bicycles, but we're still going to need cars. We're going to need cars. We're going to need trucks, and these are significantly cleaner. So yes, unfortunately, there is still a carbon footprint to them, but we're still going to need cars 20 years from now, and those cars are going to be electric.
And often you can't rely on the actions of the individual. You need to have government policy. If people are buying cars, they have to be clean. If they are driving to work, you have to encourage them to use public transportation. That's just the way it is.
This story is from Canary Media and also Electrek. This has been given the go-ahead in Ohio. One of the largest solar farms in the U.S., over 6,000 acres. This is going to cost $1 billion. This is partly owned by Bill Gates. And when it's completed, it's going to be one of the largest demonstrations of agrivoltaics, which we're a big fan of here on the show, which combines farming and solar generation. So 800 megawatts of solar, 300 megawatts of energy storage. And Ohio is very much a farming community. And unfortunately, a lot of people were upset about this. They were assuming that, well, we don't want to lose our farmland to solar. So there was a lot of opposition to this, like there often is. People don't want to look at
this is an increasing thing. This is a terrible thing that's going on in the country. People are saying, don't use up our agricultural land. And yet, they're taking the freedom away from the farmer to make that choice themselves.
Yeah, so this is going to include both. So it's around 6,000 acres, and at the start, they're going to graze about 1,000 sheep and grow crops on 2,000 acres after the first year of operation. This is going to open up in around 2025, and within 8 years of operation, at least 70% of the farmable project area, or about 4,000 acres of the 6, are going to include agrivoltaics. So yeah, this is going to be the largest agrivoltaics project in the U.S., and the first of its kind to have, livestock and grazing and row crops. So, I think part of the reason it includes the agrivoltaics is because of the opposition from the farming community who didn't want any solar. So this is a nice compromise. You get both. But good for Ohio for going ahead and approving this, even though there was lots of public opposition.
I didn't think it was going to go ahead. Do you know why Bill Gates is involved? That doesn't make sense. Like, is he just pro-solar and he wants to be involved, or is he pro-agrivoltaics and experimenting and testing and improving things?
But apparently he owns some of the land. But yeah, he's been involved in some other, clean energy projects in the past. So good for Bill Gates.
It's just insane that the rural communities would oppose solar. If I was a farmer, it would be such a good opportunity to offset my energy use for electricity And in most cases, you can be a small power generator. And even in our province, you can have, substantially more than you need, sell it to the grid. So that's like a side business on some extra tiny bit of land, really, on the grand scheme of things. Could be in your yard, can be a windbreak in your yard or whatever. You're not even wasting any space. You might even put a garden underneath of it or near it. So it's just crazy that, it's, I'd love to see solar on farms just for the personal farmer use where they're generating, a few racks of panels that are making them some money. Farmers have to adapt. They have to adapt.
Well, and they have to diversify. This seems like a great way to diversify. Like you said, if you were a farmer, maybe it's a fence. Maybe you need a giant fence. Yeah, why not make it solar?
Sure. And make gobs of money. Let's dip into the mailbag. This is Chuck in Minnesota. He asked us if Canadian post offices are setting up any charging stations because he was listening to the audiobook of Burning Case for Green New Deal by Naomi Klein. He thought it was earlier, but it's around 2019 I found that it was published, and it's published by Simon & Schuster if you are interested. It has mentioned in it a proposal in Canada to have every post office become a hub for plug-in electric car charging or other types of new energy strategies. And they wondered if that happened because we're from Canada. No, it hasn't happened to the best of my knowledge, right?
No, I don't think so. And, the post office in Canada, it's not the big deal that it once was. It's there aren't as many post offices for one thing as there used to be.
Maybe it is in small towns. I was thinking that's might be kind of a part of a center of a community if you have to pick up your mail there or
we have lots of small towns in rural Canada and a lot of those have a post office. So I think it would make sense. Might as well do it there. But no, I know that the post office is working on this. They're trying to clean their operations, with electric trucks and so forth, but no, not the charging.
I think there's probably a few examples where it might work. I'm thinking of my wife's small town where the post office is central, and maybe they could just use the property because it's on Main Street to put up a charger or something, and, because it's a federal organization. This is from Sean in Dublin, Ireland. I'm disappointed because he says top of the morning to you, that I didn't hear his Irish accent, so I had AI do it instead, and it wasn't very good, but listen.
Hi, Brian and James. Top of the morning to you. Just a quick story about Ireland's first electric milk truck tanker.
Yeah.
We have only starting rolling out electric buses here in the last year, but it is great to see that there is now electric milk trucks, and our local schools are getting solar panels installed.
Yes. He says, that's not a very good Irish accent. It's not enjoyable. I'm not getting anything out of it. I should have
this
cloned.
AI thing is overblown. It can't even do an Irish accent.
Sounds like me trying to do an Irish accent.
Yeah, that's right.
It says, our local school has just been approved for a free 6 kilowatt solar panel system, and all schools will be given a solar system in the next 1 to 2 years. We've been listening to this for as long as I've been following that solar project in Alberta, that district heating thing, that schools are a great place for solar panels, yet it's not happening very much. And I don't know why that is.
No, it's true. I think of the two schools now, Campbell Collegiate, where I went to high school, and I did mention this a few years ago, they put up solar panels about 20 years ago. Like, they're not very efficient ones, but as kind of a class project, as kind of a learning project, they did put up solar panels 20 years ago. It's not very many, and they don't produce that much power, but they're still up there. But the other, the elementary school that's a block away from my house, it's got a massive roof on it. Be great for solar.
Yeah, and our science center had primitive solar panels from around that time as well. But that would be great because you could put a display in the hallway, and it could show you a graph and some colorful graphics of what the solar is doing.
Yeah, have
and
a meter,
I've learned a tremendous amount, Brian, from having solar on my roof and just monitoring it. I learned too from having it on my RV and just the different angles and how much electricity comes when you have the perfect angle to the sun, and how much you don't have when it's not at the perfect angle, and how the sun moves, and how our friend Barry's going to have tracking, which he's going to have the maximum value of that sun throughout the day, which is cool. Gosh, I look forward to a picture of that if he ends up getting that. And he also says, so their dairy trucks here are or semi-trucks, what we would call them. They would call them lorries in Europe. He's pulling like a tanker of milk with an electric truck. I love the picture here that I found. And it's just, you're pulling up into a farm. There's not the diesel smell. The cows aren't inhaling the diesel. You're just taking the milk and going. And of course, we think that dairy is going to be disrupted by precision fermentation as well. But that's very cool that they're doing that. I would rather drink milk from an electric that came to me via an electric transportation than otherwise. You too could write us by dropping us a line at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also leave us a voicemail message. We don't often mention this, but speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow is how you can leave us an online voice message, especially if you have an Irish accent or any accent. Even a Canadian one, I'll take.
Yes. Thanks, Sean from Ireland, for that message, and apologies for the terrible AI interpretation. Okay, quick roundup of electric vehicle stories here. Just two. This is from Electrek. Lucid gets another $1 billion investment as it prepares to launch the Gravity electric SUV. So Lucid, luxury EV maker in the U.S., and they got another $1 billion of funding from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They've funded a lot of Lucid's things, and by all accounts, the Lucid cars are very good. People seem to like them, those who have driven them, but they're still not making very many. They're not selling very many, so it's a bit of a question if they're going to survive or not. But so they have another $1 billion in funding. They're going to launch the Gravity electric SUV later this year, and so with another model, hopefully they can make more and survive. And then quickly, Fisker, who we talked about a few weeks ago, because they did release a sort of a mainstream SUV, MKBHD on YouTube, had a very nasty negative review of it. Well, they've now been suspended from trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Their stock dropped down to 9 cents a share, which does not sound good. So they were hoping to get an investment from a major mainstream automaker, and apparently that fell through. So no one's quite sure what's going to happen to Fisker, but you can still buy the shares over the counter. They're just not on the New York Stock Exchange anymore. Down at 9 cents a share if you want to take a risk on somebody maybe buying them out and saving them. The car to me didn't seem too bad, but obviously not really finished. They needed a lot more work on the software. And, it's always a drag to see an electric car maker go under. So, we'll see. Lucid so far doing okay. We'll see what happens to Fisker.
Lucid, I've seen reviewers say it's the best electric car or car period they've tested. Like, they've got some very positive thoughts. Now, it's not very accessible. It's pretty expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, they're more expensive than the Tesla's expensive cars. So that's the stopping block. But yeah, apparently the technology is very good. The batteries and the engines are very good, the motors.
So they've done a good job. And as has Rivian, they've taken their time and gotten it right. And that's more than I can say. So I'm going to get to the tweet of the week now. This is from John Raymond Hanger. That's at John R. Hanger. He's an energy policy expert, professor, et cetera, And in his tweet, he says, how much utility-scale solar or wind capacity in the United States is needed to produce the same amount of electricity as the equivalent coal or gas capacity? Now, this is something that fascinates me because, when you say a solar farm has an output of, say, 1 terawatt, or something like that, or 1 gigawatt. Let's say 1 gigawatt. That's more reasonable. It's like 1 nuclear reactor. Well, it's not a nuclear reactor because it has that at solar noon. It doesn't have that, night or morning or. So I just wondered how much solar would you have to build to equate the same output and so forth. Well, here's what the capacity factors are for different energy sources. Solar is 23%, okay? So you would basically have to build 5 times the solar farm, 4.5 or something like that, to get the equivalent of what, say, a nuclear reactor does, which is at 93% efficient. Wind is 34% efficient. I'm not sure, offshore wind, I think, has some better examples of that because they're higher and they are able to capture wind for longer periods of time. So that's just wind in general. Coal is 43%, which surprised me. I assumed it would be 100%, or, you would just keep the thing going all the time, and you don't. It's actually only 43% of its maximum capacity overall. Gas is 58%. And I'm not an expert on this. I'm assuming, because of nuclear, 1 month a year, they have to be down. I assume these other plants need to be down. I know when bad things have happened in Alberta and Texas during winters recently, and there was power outages and power outage threats, it was because gas was getting maintained. There was plants that were down for maintenance.
Yeah, and they don't run them at full capacity all the time. So that's why I assume it's not closer to 100%.
And gas peaker plants, which are kind of like jet engine turbines that you have to keep going at supper time when people come home from work, those are 14 to 21% efficient. So, that's what they're doing. They're not what their maximum is. They're hardly being used. And sometimes they're just on standby for the power grid, which is why batteries are so great and save so much money. Nuclear in the United States last year was actually 93%, which is really good. In France, I think the year before was like 50% because of maintenance and outages and, repairs. 2.5 gigawatts of solar or 1.7 gigawatts of wind produce the same amount of electricity as 1 gigawatt of combined cycle gas. So if you're replacing gas, that's how much you need.
So looking at those figures, you might think, oh, well, gas is better then because you only need a gigawatt, whereas with solar you need 2.5 or 1.7 of wind. But you just build more. That's the solution.
And it's cheap, and the fuel is free. The maintenance is not free on wind turbines. You do have to maintain them. Parts maybe even wear out because it's moving, but yeah, it's a great thing. So 2 gigawatts of solar or 1.3 gigawatts of wind produce about 1 gigawatt of coal. So yeah, you need twice the solar to replace coal, but so what? I mean, a lot of solar farms are going up around coal plants. Other things are going up around coal plants. Nuclear reactors may be going up around coal plants they're talking about.
Yeah, and replacing coal, that's the low-hanging fruit. Like, this is a no-brainer. It's crazy that we still burn coal in 2024 to make electricity.
Yeah, and solar and wind produce more than gas peaking plants overall. So that is it.
Yes, and of course, battery storage is a lot of what's replacing the gas peaker plants. And yeah, if the efficiencies are as low as you say for those gas peaker plants, then it makes sense to replace them with batteries.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
A heat wave that passed through Brazil earlier this month pushed energy consumption in the country to record levels due to air conditioning use. It also raised concerns about the impacts of high temperatures on the utilities with a lot of solar on them, because the solar panels get up to 60 degrees Celsius, and we've mentioned many times on the show, but we have lots of new listeners. Solar panels are great in cold weather. They get worse in hot weather because they become less efficient. I think every degree Celsius over 25 degrees is 1% less efficient or something like that. So yeah, you lose the efficiency. It's not like they stop working. It's not like they break, but they produce less electricity because of the resistance of the heat of the panel. Yeah, so they think that it's going to be around 15% less in weather like that because the panels get up to 60 degrees. Now, the temperature wasn't 60 degrees or 140 Fahrenheit, but, they heat up. My roof gets past the 25 degree mark when it's, many, many degrees Celsius cooler than that, especially this time of the year. It's really cool out today, but the sun is getting really strong and heating up those panels, especially midday.
The sun is getting higher in the sky. It's very low in the sky here in the winter, which is one of the reasons it's so damn cold here. But spring is here. The sun is getting higher, and you can already feel the power of it increasing.
The National Renewable Energy Laboratory expects level 1 and level 2 charging to handle 80% of all EV charging duties by 2030. 33 million EVs will be on the road by 2030. And level 1 and level 2, level 1 is just your normal outlet in North America. Level 2 is something like a dryer plug where you get an electrician to install a higher powered unit at home. But yeah, 80% of all charging duties will be expected to be basically at home or work, perhaps.
Yeah, the fast charging infrastructure is very important, and that's, of course, being built out. But it's different than the situation for gas stations. People don't have gas stations in their homes. So, you don't need as many electric chargers as we currently have gas stations because, as this study says, 80% of the charging is going to be done at home by 2030, which sounds about right.
If EV naysayers, and there are a lot of them where we live, only knew how great it was never to go to a gas station, how great it is never to get an oil change. I think the oil change part's worth the price of admission right there. I hate oil changes so much.
Oh, it's so annoying.
I can see if I live long enough, I'm going to be watching YouTube videos of oil changes. It's going to be like old-timey things that remind me of my youth. It'll be quaint. It's quaint already whenever I fuel a vehicle, which is very rare. In fact, I don't know that it's ever going to happen ever again. I'm not sure that it will unless I have to rent a gas car somewhere, but I'm done fueling vehicles. I may not know how to do it, Brian. You go a year without doing it. It becomes an awkward thing at the gas station. Imagine if I went 5 years without doing it. I don't think I'd be able to do it. Russia sent missiles to destroy power infrastructure in Ukraine recently and ended up trapping over 1,000 coal miners underground for a time. They're all okay. They got out. They also hit this vast dam, killing at least 5 people and leaving more than 1 million others without electricity. And there's a movement in Ukraine to decentralize power generation with renewables. We talked about how great the wind farms and solar are going there, even during wartime, but they're hard to take out. So that's a good thing. And yeah, Ukraine, if all was normal, was wanting to be a part of Europe's decarbonization goals and help the world out. After an epic year of wildfires, Canada's air isn't as clean as it used to be. A new report finds that the 2023 wildfires produced levels of particulate matter up to 3 times higher than safe levels, or for the first time, made of Canada's air quality worse than the United States, which is not good.
Yeah, we're on the verge of spring here, which means forest fire season, and it was a very bad, smoky summer last year in Canada, and a lot of that went to the U.S., went as far as Europe, the forest fire smoke. So we're both not looking forward to summer because of the potential. It was a warm, dry winter, so the conditions for forest fires are bad. So really everybody get prepared for a smoky summer.
Meanwhile, over 100 fires burned through the winter in parts of Western Canada.
It is an unusual number this year, and I think everyone's a little bit on edge, waiting to see what that'll mean in the spring when the usual, fire-conducive weather conditions sort of turn up.
It's time for a CS Fast Fact. A wind turbine 8 kilometers away appears comparable in size as an aspirin tablet held at arm's length. So that's a good way to know. We're talking about offshore wind here. So if you're looking about how far you want to have your turbines away, a typical one in North America and Europe, 8 kilometers away appears the size of an aspirin tablet. That same turbine, just 1.5 kilometers away, will appear the size of a golf ball held at arm's length. That's from CNN of all places. How about that? CNN giving us some information. Thank you, CNN.
News you can use.
In 2024, the U.S. will add solar of 45 gigawatts. That's like 45 nuclear reactors. Wind is only going to be 8, though, Brian, which is concerning because they need, solar is running away and wind needs to catch up so that we can balance the grid better.
Yeah, and there's, of course, offshore wind coming in the U.S., but it's just kind of cranking up now, and, it's a bit of a slow start for offshore wind in the U.S.
Storage is actually like battery storage, mostly battery storage, maybe some brick storage, is going to be 8 gigawatts, or 15 gigawatts, which is almost twice of what the wind that they're putting up. So, maybe there's a lot of opposition to wind. I know they're trying to be opposition to wind. There's the oil industry is funding people to oppose it and organizing. The Biden-Harris administration announces $180 million investment in school energy infrastructure as part of Investing in America agenda. I don't know if that is going to be used much for solar panels or for insulation, but schools shouldn't be neglected.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of the school infrastructure is quite old and certainly could use more insulation, upgraded things like that.
In 2020, around 1 in 25 cars sold worldwide were electric. And 3 years later, in 2023, it was 1 in 5. So we went from 1 in 25, which seemed really sparse, to 3 years later to 1 in 5. So that is remarkable. And that's the trajectory of things are going, and people don't seem to think that's going to happen.
And 2020, of course, when we started our podcast. So I like to think that we had an influence on that.
Right. Maybe we did. Hey, by the way, do you have a Tesla referral code?
Sure. I can give you that if you want.
You should give it to me sometime. We can share it with our listeners in case somebody else goes and buys a Tesla. They can get something, you can get something, and all good. Finally this week, from the New York Times, Energy Department awards $6 billion for green steel, cement, and even macaroni factories. Industries produce 25% of America's planet-warming emissions, but so far proved very hard to clean up. The Biden administration is trying. We talked about this a little bit earlier on the show. You did. Kraft Foods is getting up to $170.9 million free from the government to install electric boilers and heat pumps at 10 facilities across the United States, where they would be used to generate the large amounts of heat needed for things like drying macaroni without directly burning fossil fuels. That's from the New York Times. Like I said, another grant may be going to Sublime Systems, a startup exploring cleaner ways to make cement. Cement manufacturers usually burn large amounts of coal or gas to generate temperatures in excess of 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which transforms limestone into lime and releases carbon dioxide as part of the chemical conversion. But Sublime uses a process powered purely by electricity that doesn't require high heat or release carbon dioxide. The company has tested its technology at a small pilot facility, and an award from the Energy Department worth up to $87 million could help the company build its first commercial plant in Massachusetts. So Kraft Dinner is getting more than the pilot project to decarbonize cement, which is, I don't know. I want to see the cement decarbonized as one of the tough ones, but there's hope. There's hope. There's people working on it.
Yeah, cement and steel, both fairly carbon intensive, but there are ways forward. Well, that is it for our show this week. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and around social media, we are Clean Energy Pod.
You can find videos of our show on TikTok and YouTube, including special content not featured here on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, our audio podcast is a little more refined. This is more of like a live production for you. So tune into the audio podcast if you care, wherever you get fine audio. The Clean Energy Store, we have a store with t-shirts and whatnot, and our show notes is linked there. We don't make any money off of it, but they are a little pricey because that's how order as you go a la carte stuff is. If you're new to the show, welcome, but remember to subscribe on your podcast app because we get new shows sent to you every week when you subscribe, and it's free. So we'll see you next week.
See you next week.